What's up, Nathan here from PH Studios. This is another After Effects tutorial, and what we're going to do in this tutorial is do a brief introduction and a very quick overview on keying and doing keyframing and stuff like that. What I mean by that is to animating the position, opacity, and stuff like that. And it's going to be a very quick tutorial. I'm not going to go in depth on the keyframing and stuff like that. We'll get to that as we go along, and we'll worry about expressions and advanced keyframing and stuff like that. So for this tutorial, it's just going to be a very quick and simple one. When you first start After Effects, you should see this screen. If you get a welcome screen, just close that out. Let's go to Composition, New Composition, and let's name this Keyframing Tutorial. And 960 by 540, leave it as 16 by 9 dimensions, and whatever seconds you want to. I'm just gonna put 1 second. Duration just 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, and 0, 0, and then OK. So now we have a composition that is 960 by 540. It's a 16 by 9 aspect ratio, so it conforms with the HD resolution 720 and 1080. So it's an HD 16 by 9 aspect ratio, but we're just going to make it a little bit smaller. Okay. So now we will see the composition on the left side. We have our list of frames and layers and everything on the bottom side, and list of the duration down here. We'll get to all this stuff later on, and let's just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to do this using everything that's built into After Effects. So very basic keyframing. I'm just going to use a text tutorial. So if we go up here and click this little T, we can create a text, and we'll just call this tutorial. And you can press Control Enter on Windows or Command Enter on Mac, and it'll close out the edit and we can move it around. Okay. So one quick tip that I did not mention. Last tutorial was just a user interface guide. It was a brief overview on that. As we go along, I'll keep on showing you more additional features and stuff you can do. One of those is, since this is a little bit small, I'm recording it at 720 resolution for YouTube and stuff like that. So since this is a little small, if you want to see the whole thing, you can just move your mouse over it and press the little tilde key on your keyboard, the one that's above tab and to the left of 1. So if you click that, or if you press that, you should see the full thing, and then if you press it again, you should see it go away. So whichever one you're hovering over, so if I hover over the project, I press that one expands to the full size of the After Effects window. If I press it again, it goes down, and likewise down here, and likewise over here. So that's a little cool tip to quickly see the full picture and go back to it. Okay, so now keyframing. I'm going to discuss the position, opacity, and rotation. And what we can do here is we can drop this little switch here, this little arrow, so it's pointing down, and then we can see the transforms, and then we can animate the position, scale, rotation, opacity, and all that stuff, anchor points. So we want to animate this from the start of the composition all the way to the end of the composition. And let's animate it to fly out to the right. So let's worry about the position in this part of the tutorial. So if we click this little stopwatch here, that allows us to modify it. So now we have a keyframe that's just this position. Now we do not have another keyframe, so it will not move. Now I want to keep this position, and I want to go to the very end of the composition. Then I want to move positive in the X direction so it flies out of the screen. And I can do the little tilde trick, and that's good enough. It's a little farther than I wanted to do, but that's pretty good. And you can see it's animation because you see the line with the dots, and that means it's animation. And if we scrub through here, we can see it animate. So that's basic keyframing on position. Now, if we go into the preview, we'll bring that down, and let's RAM preview this. We should see that it flies out. Now I'm actually going to decrease this to about 50%. So it flies out of the composition. Okay. Another cool tip is if you get click this little thing, it's title action safe, and that just gives you an overview on what to properly place where. It's best to keep in here as possible, because when that assumes that it'll be cut down to a square. So inside here is the best preferable. Then as you go out, it's the less preferable. Okay. So you can use that to modify the start keyframe. If we click the keyframe right here, we can modify the start of that by just making sure it's in the center. Let's just center it up right here. And let's move that down here. And as you can see, this position is slightly slanted up. So it's gonna kind of move up just a little bit, but it's all the way moving to the right. And you can see here, if we look at this position value, this 298 should decrease. So if you do not want to change, if you do not want that to change, if you want it to just move horizontally, we can just single click this value, copy that, go to this keyframe, and be sure to click this little right one. And so we have it highlighted, and then paste it inside there. So now when we move through the timeline, the Y value does not change. Okay, so now if we RAM preview this, it's moving it like it should. Now that's kind of boring. It's kind of uniform. It's kind of static. It just doesn't do any dynamic movement. It just kind of sets one speed, it goes, and then it stops. So to change that, we can right-click a single keyframe or right-click them all. You just hold left-click and highlight them all if you want to. But I'm just going to highlight this one. Right-click, keyframe assistant, and easy ease in, and easy ease out, and easy ease. That allows us to slowly transition from on to off. As you see in the first few seconds, it barely moves, and then it speeds up, and there we go. And then likewise, if we select this one, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, it'll slowly slow down. So now if we RAM preview, it kind of slowly speeds up and then slowly speeds down. So that's what easy ease does. Okay, so now the scaling. It's like the same thing. We're just going to go to the very beginning, click this little stopwatch. It's 100%, and let's scale it down to about 50. Now these are linked, so I can left click one of them, hit 45, and it'll change the other one since they're linked to right here. I'm going to change it back to 50, so we do not need to change both values. As you can see, it's growing and it's shrinking. So to really demonstrate that, I'm going to make this about 300. So we see that, and we're going to move through the timeline, and you see it's getting smaller. Now it's getting bigger. Now I'm going to change that back to about 110 or something. There we go. Now, rotation. Same thing. We left click at the start of the timeline, and then we go to the very end, and then we set it as, oh, I don't know, -50. That will rotate it counterclockwise. Now, if we take this, the first rotation keyframe, and let's move it down here. Let's move it down here, and let's move this one, and move it in. Now what we're going to do here is it's not going to rotate at all until it reaches this point. Then it's going to rotate pretty quick until it reaches the other point. And then it's just going to stay that rotation value. So we're just rotating it from 0 to -50 from this point to this point. Not at the very beginning and all the way not up to the very end. So we just move those keyframes close up. So it's not at the very beginning and not at the very end. We can move it even closer if you prefer. So it just does that. Now let's do a RAM preview, and there we go. Okay, so very simple tutorial. That's just the very basics of keyframing. There's a lot more cool stuff we can do with them, and we'll get to that later on in the series. But for a first tutorial, I believe that should be good enough. Now, this whole GUI user interface is a little intimidating at first. When I first looked at this, I really didn't think I could understand After Effects that well. But once I did, I understood it's a lot easier than it looks. So just keep on practicing, keep on make another text one that is says something else, new text, and keep on using the transform and keyframes and play around with it. Like, you can start it at some value. I can start it with a rotation like this at the very beginning, and I can go to about here and set it to 0, and so I can do all sorts of stuff. See what happens when you switch them around. Move the first one there, it just reverses the effect, and things like that. Just play around with it. I can select them both. I can right-click them, right-click any one of them, and then do easy ease, and then it'll easy ease both of them, and things like that. Just play around with it. Change the anchor point. Anchor point is that little circle, looks like a cursor or something like that, and it's just an anchor point. The anchor point lets us know the point of rotation, the point of, yeah, see, I'm rotating it. It's rotating based on that little circle object there, that anchor point. So it's rotating based on the anchor point, not the center of the text as it was before. If I push the anchor point in, then it moves like that. If I push it way out, then the text moves way out, and then I can rotate it based on that. So wherever that anchor point is, it'll rotate based on that. The text will be some distance from that if you set the value up high enough. I just leave it as the center of the text right there, and maybe even the center on the Y if you want to do that. So that way it'll just rotate like that. It's up to you. You can play around with all this stuff and see what you come up with, and stay tuned for the next tutorial. Next tutorial we'll actually be getting into the good stuff. I'm going to discuss particle systems. It's built into After Effects. The problem is it's not available on the trial. I think you have to unlock the trial to get the effect. But I'll talk about that next time.